everybody. So I guess I'm closing out the day here, but my talk today is how to use AI agents to maximize your marketing and lead generation. So I know a lot of you guys are doing various things, building various startups, all those kind of things. But at the end of the day, I truly believe everything in life is marketing and sales. So if you can find your audience, and then you can provide a good service, that's how you can essentially build your business. So right now, I truly believe we are in the golden age of reach, is how I will describe it. What a 50-person team used to be able to do in 2019, simply one person can do right now with the power of social media. Maybe Ted will block us out at some point in time because we're spamming here too much, obviously tongue in cheek. But I think at the end of the day, you can use social media as an extremely powerful tool as a marketing engine. So you could essentially bring your product that nobody really knows about into millions of people potentially, all with just one video. And one video can drastically change your life, change your business, all those kinds of things. So we do have a big problem here though now, because essentially now with AI, you have massive amounts of information. You can go and simply say, ChatGPT, your Claude bot, whatever, give me 100 sources on a specific topic, and you will be able to get 100 sources essentially within, half a second or maybe even a second, maybe even 5 minutes. But still, that rapid input of information is way quicker than anything that would have taken time, a bunch of time at the end of the day. But like I said, the tool isn't the advantage here. It's really the human and your ability to sift through that information and use that information to your advantage, and in basically to help with that marketing, that sales, whatever that task is at hand. So you guys got to think, right? The AIs that you have right now essentially are just a black box, right? So you're putting, the entire internet onto whatever it is, say a Claude bot, right? I use 4 or 5 different Claude bots on a daily basis. And they're all for different tasks. And when I ask a specific Claude bot to do a task, it will spit out information. 90% of the time, if I haven't trained that Claude bot on the back end, that information is very, very poor. So you need to basically treat the AI as maybe a young employee, because that's essentially what it's doing, right? It's taking some of the grunt work off of your plate and being able to help you become more efficient. So I think the reality is that early on, a lot of people are relying on AI to create content, create marketing, create emails, do all of these things to help them become more efficient, but they miss the vital part, which is essentially training that AI to be, the best it can be. So the biggest takeaway that I want you guys to take away from this at early on is when you first start with the AI, the most important thing and the most important step that you can do, especially early on, is by feeding that AI as much information as possible. So social media, for example, you can feed it tweets that go viral. Hey, I want to look at PlebLab, for example. PlebLab has a great Twitter that I want to emulate. What works on PlebLab's channel and what doesn't work? And I think that's another big thing too. You want to feed it the positive and negative so it understands what you're trying to get at and really understands really what can be beneficial. So you can have AI essentially be this bot at the back end that not only is helping you filter information, but filter information that is beneficial to whatever you're trying to get across, right? Whether it's Twitter, YouTube, social media, find leads, all that kind of thing. And I'll get into a little bit more on how I use that here in a second. But the reality is AI initially, when you first download it, first use it, it can't tell the difference between what is good and what is bad. It essentially just sends you everything. So, yeah, like I said, it gives you the speed, but you have to give it the taste on what you think that is good, what is beneficial. So you have to think, a lot of people treat AI like a vending machine. They want to give it a prompt and then they want to get that answer out. But this is only about 10% of what AI can do, right? The beneficial thing about AI is that it can help with that filtering mechanism. It can help with essentially distilling down that information and helping you, give you more options, but, essentially give you options that are a little bit better suited. An example of this is, I'm a social media influencer, for lack of a better term, but I try to do live streams on a daily basis, or, at least 3 times a week. So part of my process is every morning I wake up, I scour the internet, and I look at what is kind of relevant news to the Bitcoin and, macro space. What is going on, right? So I spend a couple hours doing research here or there, and then I kind of have a general understanding as to what will work because of my experience of just making thousands of videos. So you have to think, I was like this AI at the beginning. I could make a video on anything, but I've realized that maybe, making a video every single day could be overkill, whatnot. But essentially, I've become that filtering mechanism. So now I've trained my AI based on previous results. I say, hey, here are some of the benchmarks that I want to use. These are some of the topics that I use that have reached these benchmarks. Maybe we can experiment here or there, but I know this works. So if you see this said topic or whatever it is in the morning, tell me and give me all of the sources that you see on this and say, hey, Brandon, every single morning it sends me at 8 o'clock in the morning, daily live stream brief. I think that we should do one today. I think that we shouldn't do one today. And to be honest, when it does do that, usually it hits my, a little bit above average on the views for that live stream. And when I go against it and say, hey, I just want to do a video today for the sake of doing it, generally it's a little bit lower. So it's helping bring in and save a lot of time in doing a lot of that filtering, just simply because I trained it a lot at the beginning. So even though you are the filter at the end of the day, it kind of can help you through that process. So you have to try to emulate and put your brain essentially inside inside that AI. Oh, whoops. Well, I guess that's same slide. And so how does this marketing agent essentially help bring you in more leads? I see this as 2 ways, and these are 2 ways that I'm using it in my business here today. One is cold outbound. So essentially, I have AI scour YouTube because I like to help other YouTube channels essentially grow, right? That's part of my arm is YouTube and Twitter consulting. So I have my AI essentially scour the internet, scour YouTube, and look at channels that are posting regularly but are not necessarily exceeding in views. So every morning, my AI bot, one of them, sends me 50 cold leads with emails that are usually attached to that. And I just send a cold email out there, right? And I say, hey, you know what, we can do some personalized touch to this. We see that you're posting X amount, every single week or whatever it is. And we think we can help increase your leads. So that's cold outbound. The other is warm inbound as well, which, you can get through content creation. When you're making different content, people see your videos, whether it's Ted's feed filter, or, Wes is here in the crowd. He's been making some videos here lately. He's actually had somebody reach out to him from one of his videos that went, semi-viral here fairly recently. So that is another qualified lead that you can bring in there. So essentially using AI to improve the quality of your content, as well as help you with cold outbound leads, is kind of the two-armed approach that I'm using right now to kind of accelerate the growth of my business. And this is essentially a compounding effect, right? So when you have that inbound, that warm inbound coming in, and you're creating that content, now you're kind of creating a brand, so to speak. You're creating a face to the name. So when you cold outbound this person and you send an email and they look for Wesley Schlemmer or Brandon Keys somewhere, they're going to see a lot of your videos and a lot of the things that you're putting out. So now you're not just some random AI bot that is sending out, hundreds of thousands of emails every single day. You're an actual person behind there. So that person doesn't necessarily feel like, okay, this is just a standard AI email. I'm going to send this straight to the spam folder or trash or something like that. Now you have a face to the name. So when you're bringing in that cold outreach, you could actually direct them to either your YouTube channel or your X account or LinkedIn, whatever you are actively posting content on. And once you kind of build that digital profile, so to speak, that really helps bring in those cold leads and makes that, hit rate on the cold leads increase even more. And then, of course, obviously the inbound leads from creating content, that just accelerates over time as well. And the reality is that AI allows you to create more content a lot quicker. A good example of this, and I'll get into some of my clients' work here in a minute, but myself personally is, like I told you guys at the beginning of this talk, is early in the morning, I used to spend a couple hours every single day researching, deciding whether or not I would do a live stream. Now that decision is somewhat made for me within the first 20 or 30 minutes of me waking up. So I can filter through that. And if I want to do the research and kind of dive in a little bit more, I have that option. But essentially, AI can help me with that. It can help write a script, help kind of outline some things that normally takes me 2 or 3 hours. So then I'm ready to go and do that live stream, shortly thereafter. And then from there, I've been able to use that script and say, okay, now I want to send this out to my written community, to my Substack audience. So now I'm doubling that content and essentially putting it out in another place and saying, hey, I want to do a newsletter, a Substack article about this. So now it's another piece of content that could be a potential lead generation tool. And I could also, turn that into a tweet, turn that into a LinkedIn post. Essentially, the aspects of this are endless, and that wouldn't have been possible without AI because simply those tasks just take a lot of time and there's not enough hours in the day. So now, instead of just creating one video a day, I can create one video a day. I could do a LinkedIn post a day. I could post 10 tweets a day, and I can, post a newsletter or a couple newsletters a week. So it's really just exponentially helping the output. Of course, I don't have my, and maybe we can get into this later if you guys have questions about it, but I don't have my agents putting out the content and shooting it off directly. I still go through and look through it, but that is something that it takes, maybe 20, 30 minutes to revise, opposed to a couple hours to read, or a couple hours to do the research, a couple hours to write, and everything like that. It just drastically takes down my time. So the content will help make that cold outreach even warmer, and then you can turn those cold outreach into prospects, which can help grow your business here drastically. And I think that this is truly a part of the evolution of businesses that I've seen here. I think around 2015 time, when I was first coming out of grad school, I heard a lot about data. Everybody would say, oh, the companies that have more and more data, that is essentially gold, right? Any company that could really look at how businesses are operating and really analyze where their shortcomings are, what's really effective, they can really lean into that. But they needed a bunch of data enabled in order to do that. I would say maybe in 2020 time, everybody kind of started getting into the content is gold because everybody was at home, during COVID and on the phones, doom scrolling, all that kind of thing. So everybody was saying, okay, well, I need to get into social media marketing. But now I think that, in 2025, especially with what has gone on in the past month and a half, I'd say, with Claudebot and the AI agents, you can really combine all of those things with the data, the content, and AI to essentially make your business have that ultimate package where essentially you can have, your social media posts go up, and then your social media posts, before you would have to have a person really look at it. Okay, this worked, this didn't. You would need an expert to kind of break down what strategies worked and not. Now, social medias all have so much data in the back end. You could simply just take a screenshot as those things go up and feed it to your Claude bot and say, okay, take a note of what is working and what isn't, and it can help improve. And that is just an exponential growth curve over time. So the combination of, essentially feeding your AI bot what is working on your content and that data essentially can help your business increase the output and then drastically increase the quality of the content over time, which can then, bring in more leads. And it's just kind of this exponential curve that I think at some point in time, maybe in 2015 or maybe before, it would take a long time to build up all of these processes. But now I think you can really do that very quickly, and it can take you significantly less time, because I think a lot of startups, I've been coming and speaking at a lot of the PlebLab events for a few years now. I think a lot of startups just really neglect the marketing process at first because they think, okay, I don't necessarily have that product to put out there. I'm worried that everything is going to go viral, or I'm going to have too much inbound and all of these things. But the reality is the marketing process takes time. It takes some iteration. And so now I think the AI tools can be used to help, quicken that process, make it less of a burden, and, essentially increase the quality. So, when you launch that product, it can definitely bring in a lot more inbound leads. So how I've set this up essentially is this is kind of the workflow that I use. Is I've looked up, a feed of various, whether it's Twitter accounts, YouTube accounts, things like that, that I think have been quality and that I want to kind of emulate their style or are in my similar niche. And I go through and literally spend hours, maybe like a 6 or 8 hours one day, just screenshotting a few months of what they have done and putting it into my Claudebot and just feeding it that information. When you first set up your AI, that's the biggest step, right? Just feeding it, feeding it, feeding it as much data as possible. Then you set up what you want to do after that. So, for the cold outreach, you want to say, okay, I want it to meet these specific parameters over time, right? Like, here's some good examples of YouTube channels that I can see are really, putting out a lot of content, but they're under exceeding in views in what I think that they could be doing because, they have a bigger niche, or they're, maybe, whatever problem is with their thing. And then the second arm is like, okay, I've got this list of people and I can start that cold outreach, but they don't really know who I am yet, right? They got this guy, Brandon Keys, in his email saying your YouTube sucks. And they're like, what does this guy know, right? So this is where the second arm comes in, where you're starting to build that content. So when you say, okay, I can record a Loom video, or I could, send them to my YouTube channel, which shows I'm an expert in whatever manner it is or whatever product I'm building. I can send them some announcements. Something like that just makes that cold outreach a little bit better. And then from there, you learn, right? So as you're putting these things out, you feed that data back into your AI. The data process is always going to be continual. You always want these bots to continue to learn and continue to iterate on these processes to become better, because that's essentially what they're built for. So, and then, like I said, then you repeat it, right? Then you just keep on feeding it, you keep on iterating, and you keep on tracking the other accounts that are doing well. You keep on tracking, what outreaches, what strategies on the outreaches are working, and you're not afraid to essentially iterate and show, hey, I sent out 50 cold outreach emails. I did, 20 this way that I know works, 20 this way that kind of works, and 10 maybe I'm experimenting. And I'm feeding all of that information back into my AI so that AI can just learn and tell you over time, hey, these are the strategies that are working, and this is what we should really lean into. And I've seen this here in three different aspects. So, for those of you in the crowd who might not know, I have my own personal channel and growth engine, which is Green Candle. But I also do consulting for, like I said, some other social media channels. My biggest and most notable is TFTC. They've kind of started and grown a lot here in Austin. We're nearly at 100,000 subscribers here and nearly at 100,000 followers on Twitter. But a big aspect that we've used is essentially, as a news media outlet, you could spend like all day on Twitter and you can still miss some breaking news. But if you have a bot scraping for what is going on, you could essentially get that information out quicker. We have a small team at TFTC, but essentially, we've had a lot of tweets go fairly viral, and I'll bring those up here later, within the past few days, and they've all been AI generated, down to the image, down to the research, down to everything. And essentially it's helped with a lot of that. It's helped with a lot of the pre-processing, script writing, title optimization, a lot of things that would take a lot of time, but has essentially cut my time that has, been needed for that, but has increased my output. So essentially I can take on more clients. Like I said, I've been helping Wesley here for about a month, and I'll show you a little bit of his results here, but it's also increased my output on Green Candle. So, from a consulting perspective or whatever your business is, a lot of times, your business just takes a lot of your time. And so what AI has been able to do is help make me more efficient and make, my time more quote unquote valuable and make my output even better. So, with that, I think, like I said, it kind of helps with this flywheel that I said. You feed your AI all of this data, you help get the cold outbound leads and research, then you can bring in more warm inbound through your content and your various audience, and then you just keep the flywheel going with the results and the learning. So every cycle, your AI and you yourself are getting even smarter, you're getting better results, and then it just kind of starts this exponential growth curve. And lastly, I know this is partially Bitcoin related, but what I think this also helps with is that when you save in your business a little bit with better money, like with Bitcoin over time. So not only is AI helping your output, right, you can save in money that doesn't devalue. So, I mean, we've seen a big boom in the Bitcoin treasury companies here, but I think everybody can do that just a tiny bit on whatever your business is, because you'll be able to, grow your team significantly, or grow your not team, but grow your output significantly and stay thinner towards the beginning of your business. And then you can save in something like Bitcoin instead of bringing on somebody that is way more, who will make some human errors, who will cost more money, who will, essentially, do all those things that just kind of eat into the bottom line of the business. So with the power of AI and essentially helping, limit that, I think you can really bring in and make yourself more efficient, which can help keep that bottom line low, and then can help you stack for the long term, which will help the health of your business in the long run. So like I said, I'm Brandon, and I've really kind of gone all in on this AI side of things. So thank you guys for your time. I'll show you a little some of my examples here in a second, but I want to open it up if you guys have any questions here, just to start off.
Have you gotten it to where you can feed it like a 30-minute or hour-long raw video, let's say like this presentation, feed it through your open claw, throw like a Mr. Beast algorithm on there to cut up the video, something that would just go viral on YouTube or Twitter?
Yeah, so I mean, I do that basically right now. So my whole process, like for example, for TFTC, they put out podcasts. So what my old process used to be was Marty would record an hour to 3 hours plus maybe podcast. I would listen to that and say, okay, here's the juicy parts. We want to make a 30-second or a 1-minute clip at the beginning. And I send those intro clips over to Logan, their editor. He makes their intro clip, and then I come up with titles, and then we have thumbnails and everything like that. Now I have the transcript. I've trained my AI to basically be like, this is what works. These are the beneficial parts. I download the transcript, feed it to my AI, and it gives me, 10 intro clips that are good, and I help distill that out. So, I listen to some of them because I still, I do enjoy the show. I am a fan, but now on some of them where I'm a little bit more crunch for time, I can get those intro clips to Logan within 30 minutes, not even.
Skill for that guy out there?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't made a skill, but what I've done is essentially, taken YouTube videos of YouTube experts. One of them name is Patty Galloway. I'm taking his YouTube accelerator right now. And he goes into a lot about what is good in retention, and there's a lot of like information out there on what strategies he uses, and he actually helped Mr. Beast with a lot of his stuff. So he breaks down on what, is good and bad in various videos. I simply, I've watched those over the years to kind of help my YouTube, expertise. But now I just go and say, Claude, write me a script to download this video. We'll download the video on my device. All right, turn this MP4 into a transcript. I'll upload it to my Claude bot. Hey, remember this, and utilize the framework that they're lining out here in order to help with TFTC's podcast. And then same thing with thumbnails. I say, okay, these are strategies that work. Here are some viral thumbnail formats that I've seen.
You get surprised every time.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, it still takes like, even with, having essentially just a big repository of data on things that work and that don't on YouTube, it still takes like sometimes of me going through and distilling and being like, okay, I like the idea that you have here, but we can do better.
Or even if a topical event happens, go back into the history of the archive and then create clips based on the content you have for that topical thing that happened, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, I can even show a good example of that here. I guess I'll don't tell everybody that I'm showing you guys the back end of this, I guess. But huh? Well, it's all right.
You're gonna write a poem skill anyway, so we can all steal your.
Yeah. But this is like we did a Jesus Christ. Let me see.
But you got all those surprise faces from those thumbnails. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I like to show this one because this is a big, this is like a big outlier video. But you can see this big bump here, and you're like, okay, what happened, right? So this was already a video that was doing super well, but I know in my YouTube expertise that if it is still feeding, if it's still getting a certain amount of impressions, let's say, that YouTube is still trying to find the audience, so it's still trying to grow. Well, this originally we had, the title was Why 2026 is America's Second Civil War, or something like that. But they talked about Venezuela. So when the whole Maduro thing happened, I said, okay, like this is send an alert when something of these transcripts, like, that we could go back and change. And so we went back and changed this title to Trump's Venezuela strategy. And then you see it went from about 180,000 views to nearly 100,000 more. So, to your point, we do use AI to essentially go back and iterate. I have used it, in other instances as well, where Gold and silver was super hot maybe like a month ago, right? When the silver markets were going crazy. So looking at changing those things over time, you know, I've always kind of had those alerts, and maybe I'll go back, and once I get those alerts 2 months later or something like that, and the video isn't getting pushed, it's not worth it, and I can use my judgment. But that is still something where having those alerts as a secondary, or as a benefit that previously wouldn't have. Um, so yeah, that's a great question. Car, go ahead.
Yeah, so I have two questions. The first one is around the AI video stuff. Like, what are some good starters, like just video editors that you would recommend for people that are trying to make their flip life easier? And then the second question is around your great new Substack that I subscribe to.
Thank you.
How do I make a similar one for car, but like kind of the same flow that you're using with your videos and stuff? Like what kind of tools are you using for something like Substack as well too?
Yeah. So what I so the to the first question on clips, there is like a paid AI that you can use that is called Opus. That makes a lot of great clips. It kind of goes through and essentially distills that out. Um, what I have done, and like what we're kind of doing over at TFTC, is creating like our own internal Opus, which is a little bit more of a tall task to do that. But essentially, it goes through, and we know what works well specifically for our content. So it'll go in and say, okay, from 2 minutes and 30 seconds to 3 minutes and 20 seconds, this 50-second clip was gold. You guys should do that. We can just put simple, captions on it, and that would make it great. There's another tool called Remotion, which essentially like can go hand in hand and work with Claude. I haven't done a ton of playing around with that yet, but my editor uses that to kind of speed up his editing process. And he uses Claude to essentially prompt it and talk back and forth.
Oh wow, I see it here. Yeah, that's cool, man.
Yeah,
It's just he's basically just using like CLI to do all that stuff.
exactly.
Makes I feel like that emotion.
Yeah. And then to your second question, basically, like I just use Claude Bot for all of it. So I have one Claude Bot that I've kind of trained to be my YouTube expert, and then I have one that's essentially my back office at Green Candle. So what I do is I have my YouTube expert that knows everything about, writing a script and everything like that. I have it write a script for me for my live streams, and it sends like an MD file, which I just pull up in like notes or something. And it has a bunch of links, things like that. I simply just feed that MD file to my other Claude bot, and I say, hey, can you turn this into a Substack newsletter? I took some screenshots of like TFTC's newsletter, some other newsletters that I like to read, and I said, hey, here's some other formats that I like. Can you try to emulate that based on this script that was created for me for this live stream? And it will give me, a pretty good outline. And then a lot of times it'll say, okay, like put these images here, or, find these charts. And, half the time, I mean, I have my own AIs create those charts or create those graphics as well, to kind of.
You have like access to the API, or are you more just like copy pasting and then it takes you like what used to take you 2 hours to write something now takes you 20 minutes or something?
Yeah, so I just kind of, I import the MD file or whatever it is into there, and then it'll shoot out another MD file. So I copy and paste it. I don't give it, right now, I don't give AIs any access to like shoot anything off. So emails, tweets, nothing. I don't want any outbound. I simply just take it as inbound, because I still think that there is some need for like the human element of things. So I'm not, I've heard some horror stories of like shooting off like bad tweets or something like that. So I avoid that, but, it does help with like scheduling, things out during the day, kind of building that repertoire that way. But
Yeah, it's good. I mean, doesn't really like, yeah.
Yeah, like I go through and read through it. But like I said, to write, I don't really enjoy writing too much particularly. So I think that used to take me hours just because I didn't enjoy it, like sitting down 4 hours to write a good quality newsletter. But I realized I'm doing this research anyway. Might as well just bring it to a different audience who maybe didn't want to hear me just yell hot air into a microphone for a while. So like I said, I think like it just kind of helps you bring in more content, which allows you to use more of a lead generation tool, allows you to create more essentially.
Is your OpenClaw manually going to the browser, like on YouTube or places or Twitter to scrape, or are you just hooked into an API?
Yeah. So I have like YouTube has a free API that you can use, and if you have a YouTube API or YouTube channel, you can give it your YouTube API as well. So it has two, one that's just general and one that is like specifically for your channel. So you can pull in like all of the backend data that you see from like your YouTube studio, and you can pull that in if you really wanted to do like advanced analytics on it. And I've created a dashboard to do that, but I haven't really gone too deep into that, to be honest. But yeah, that, and then I have like the Brave API with it, which is just like a general free API that you could do web search. Um, and Twitter has an API, but I think you have to pay a little bit like more. I think it's like a couple $100 a month.
Give you some recommendations on Twitter APIs.
Yeah, I would love to hear more. Yeah. So I haven't really done too much with like the Twitter API stuff.
It's just a Grok API.
Yeah, I mean, probably but I mean, like I do, I use various, like the beautiful thing about OpenClaw is like you can use a bunch of different APIs. So I used to have the memory hooked up on OpenAI's API because I heard that AI API was a little bit better. Now there's like an open source, I think it's called like LanceDB, that I've upgraded the AI, my memory to, which has worked a lot better. But like the OpenAI API, I still use that for like image generation and to help like make thumbnails, because I think ChatGPT making the images is just better than Claude can right now. So
Are you integrating Nostr at all?
I have not, but TFTC has used this this stuff to basically create a cross-posting bot, which is something that is on my list to basically use like a cross post on X and Twitter, or on X and Nostr, to essentially bring that over. But I am not.
As far as trying to figure out how to scrape, I would highly suggest it's like my volume of feed in my signal on Nostr is significantly smaller, but the percentage of quality information I get is significantly larger, despite it being a fraction of what I'm getting from every other platform.
Yeah.
Especially for TFTC, there might be some real value there.
Yeah, like I said, TFTC has created that cross-posting bot already, so they're using it. They've seen a massive jump in their Nostr following since doing that. So, yeah, for me that's a little bit, like I would say, like a little lower on the list. I do think that, like I said, it's a valuable to be on like multiple platforms and like to increase that output. I just haven't, given myself a weekend to vibe code to do that yet.
And for input too, like, to your point of like finding small channels and then outliers, it's like also small social media platforms. Like if you scrape Nostr or Stacker News, there might be things that Bitcoiners are talking about that like the general population isn't talking about. And someone needs like a channel of like a really, well communicated, getting that information out there to the broader audience, maybe get like ahead of the curve. That's someplace like that.
Yeah. So like that's actually a good segue, because I've at TFTC they do a lot of like scraping various sources that Marty has found very very informative over time. So what he does is essentially scrape a lot of these sources and use them to help craft like a newsletter. Marty and TFTC has now puts out a daily newsletter called the Bitcoin Brief, and we put out tweets about it every single morning. So that brief is, it's a lot of it is AI generated, but just this past weekend, they, Marty and them found this story that was kind of going semi-viral in a different niche about, the U.S. military creating Lyme's disease and using that as, basically like a biological weapon. But nobody in the Bitcoin space was really talking about it. So we created a skill to turn the newsletter into like a long form tweet. So I did that, created this tweet. I took this screenshot from Google Maps, and you wouldn't believe how long it took me to get these dots to line up, but I got these dots to line up, and we tweeted that out. And because of that, that tweet got 4.1 million views there. And so then I saw, okay, this works. Let's do a different angle on it. We did a different angle on it literally the very next day, 1.2 million views. So, that is something that you can do with AI that drastically helped. And I used AI to create the images as well.
You're the guy behind all these tweets. I'm seeing.
I'd like to take credit for all of them, but there is a few people working on them. And then, like I said, for news-based stuff, right? Seeing what works. You could say, okay, TFTC's got nearly 100,000 followers. I've got like 13,000, and I was able to, find this clip that AI thought that my audience would find valuable, and I was still able to get, 1.2 million views. And I brought up my analytics here to kind of show you guys, because I think that this is kind of the for a data guy, this is the power behind going viral. Is essentially, my low end days were around 40,000 impressions. And then, I started to build a little momentum. Then I went viral. Now my low end days look to be around 90,000 impressions. So literally like doubling that. And then that's how you kind of stack is, you go viral, and then, people start to see you a couple times, and then you start to gain more followers, and that kind of just starts the flywheel. So, and like I said, it doesn't matter really what size you are. I wanted to shout out Wes here because, he's got one video that's popping, and it seems like it's going to start ramping up here again. So no matter what, you can just keep inputting that, and you can, create some viral content, which could help bring in leads to your business.
Who pays better, YouTube, Elon, or Rumble?
I have a gripe with Rumble. Rumble doesn't have an algorithm. So like, the only way that you can get big on Rumble is that the people at Rumble, and you can get on their front page, or like they send out an email of your content.
Tether needs to fix that.
Yeah, so like Rumble is not, in my opinion, like I think the whole, I'm censored on YouTube is like the biggest scam in history. Like nobody's censored on YouTube, especially in like the Bitcoin and AI space. And this is coming from a guy I've had an interview taken down. So like and I truly believe nobody is really, like, you have to have something going mega viral in order for the people at YouTube to flag it, and then, have it.
That means you have to go viral and you have to say the no words.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, you're probably not big enough to be on YouTube's radar to be doing that kind of stuff in order to, bring them all down, or to get censored. So,
Twitter or X or?
So X doesn't pay. Like X, it's different because X shows impressions and YouTube shows views on the front end. So like YouTube, as just a general CRM, they'll pay like $5 to $15 per 1,000 views, but you have to reach like a certain threshold. X, that threshold to meet is a lot harder, and you don't really get paid that much. Like,
So YouTube for the money's at.
yeah, long form content is like, you have to think like, if you're making a 20-minute video, Google can put like 3 or 4 ads in that one video. So just the longer the content, the more ads they can put in, which means more people spend money, which,
All right. Well, thank you, Brandon, for presenting. I appreciate it.
Yeah.